darkest of shadows. Unlike the corporate suits, the whale panda is wise. A chicken dreams about the moon while soaring in the skies. As Bitcoin sees new all-time highs. Magical crypto. All around me I see big blockheads. Magical crypto. The best thing to do is simply to hodl. When scam coins try to turn the tide, you'll quickly rush to my side. Pods and fix and Toshis will crown, but I'm not scared if you're around. We'll always run a full Bitcoin core node. Scaling the right way is a long and challenging road. Segwit is now here for the USF we cheer. Layer 2 solutions are a must. Always verify, don't trust. Magical crypto. All around me I see big blockheads. Magical crypto. The best thing to do is simply to hodl. We'll always buy the dip, and we'll always be the best of the rest.
Okay, so welcome to the first and potentially last, the Magical Crypto Friends Show. A very safe place for crypto animals. We have with us Samson, Chief Trolling Officer at Exalion Headwares. Ricardo, CEO of the Monero Enterprise Alliance. And Charlie Lee, the lead dev of the Bitcoin testnet. And me, Whale Panda, of course, everyone knows me. Let me start off by saying that we're late because of Samson. So if we are a bit tired or look a bit tired, it's all because of Samson. And yeah. So, well, let's start off with the No2X. The conclusion, what you guys think, and what also maybe interesting will be, what will be the next potential attack?
Obviously, it's 3x.
Well, do you guys all agree 2x was an attack?
Definitely.
It was the weirdest way to handle things, like to get a bunch of people into a room and make them sign an agreement and sort of force them into that. And I mean, the whole thing just imploded at the end.
I think they had good intentions. I mean, was trying to like keep the community together, to agree to something and to compromise between the miners and the developers and the community. But in the end, they didn't get like a compromise. Basically, it was causing the split as opposed to keeping everyone together. So I mean, they finally realized how stupid it was and canceled it, which also showed how centralized it was.
Which I guess also begs the question, I mean, how important are developers? You know, because there tends to be this weird rift between relying on developers and then also like despising them.
Well, I think that comes from the corporate mindset, right? Like, for most companies and a lot of the CEOs in this space, their experience is just hiring devs that they can tell what to do and boss around, right? It's kind of weird that you can't tell developers what to do, and that causes a lot of rifts and frustration.
Well, I also think that an issue was that a lot of companies were actually surprised that Science were surprised that the core devs were not in on it. A lot of like 3 or 4 companies said like, oh, but we thought it was supported by at least some core devs.
Well, it goes back to Charlie's point. A lot of people sign for different reasons, and some actually did want to help and kind of bridge the gap and bring people together, and some, wanted to push their own agenda. But definitely there's people there that didn't know that the core devs didn't sign up for it and that there was no consensus. They just got an email blast and pressure to say, sign this thing.
Well, I mean, how else is Barry Silver going to get everyone together to sign something, right? So I think he basically put a stab out there, like 2 megabytes with SegWit, and tried to get everyone to kind of agree. He tried his best, I think.
It's almost like consensus is very difficult. I mean, who knew? Just expect it to work, right?
Yeah, you could say he tried his best, but then you could look at it another way too, in that was actually a good time for a lot of the businesses and everyone to stand up together to miners and mining pools that didn't want to activate and say, it's time to stop messing around and let's move forward too.
That's true. I mean, SegWit, from what I can tell, talking to everyone, SegWit had consensus. I mean, there's obviously a few people who are against it for unknown reasons. But it's a very good upgrade, and most people were for it. So it didn't make sense to me why miners were against it until the ASIC boost thing came out. Like before that, I'm like, miners are making money hands over heels, and they're complaining about it, and they want to destroy their cash cow for some reason. Didn't make any sense at all.
It's a fine line, because with SegWit it's actually harder to game the fees and manipulate the fees. So if they lose that in addition to ASIC boost, then it's a loss in revenue. But then the line is crossed if they kill Bitcoin, right? So it's a fine dance. It's a bluff.
My main issue with everything is that the companies were just spreading false information, and everyone that was No2X was just a troll or a sock puppet. Everyone on Twitter was just a troll or a sock puppet, because they controlled like 30 million users that they claim. So there was a lot of false information going around. And also, for example, if you think about it, they found three bugs in the code. Four. Okay, four. Yeah.
Four known.
So which are the four? I only remember three, but I mean, three is already bad enough. Three like critical ones.
They couldn't actually generate a bigger block, even when the time came.
And there was the off by 2, off by 1, off by half a block, however many. How do block heights work? We don't even know. Humankind doesn't know how to work out block heights at this stage.
I'm just surprised there's no test for it, right? I mean, this is like a basic test you would add.
You could test it on a testnet, but that probably didn't come to mind.
That requires you to have a functional testnet. I'm just saying.
And with just one developer, that's hard enough.
Yeah, see, it's all your fault, Charlie. You should have made Litecoin 2x and let them test it there first.
You should have just had blockchain governance. I mean, blockchain governance solves everything, guys.
So what do you think is the next potential attack?
Bcash.
Yeah, Bcash. I think so too. It's just trying to steal the brand, but
yeah, it's an internal attack, right? It's really splitting the brand, the community. With like Roger Ver and Bitcoin.com, he has like a forum. He has a Reddit site, RBTC. He has a pool, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of like if he's directing all new users that go to his site to pretend that the Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin, then it's just really confusing.
He also has a wallet.
Yeah.
Peter Risen, I think on Twitter, called it a messy divorce. I think that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, because it is a messy divorce right now. You know, sock puppets aside, you've got people legitimately in the community that think that Bitcoin Cash is the future, and that's their prerogative. I personally don't have a problem with Bitcoin Cash as a project. I think there's got to be a place for big blockers to go, and that should be the place for them to go. I have an issue with this whole idea of like Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. You know, I mean, why confuse things that way? It's not good for anyone. Like, have a project called Bitcoin Cash, no problem, but don't create something where it's like Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin, and now people don't really know which way the wind's turning.
yeah, exactly. There's definitely a demand for bigger blocks. So they have it now. So also on Twitter, I have no problem with Bcash, but let them go their own way and stop trying to mess with Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, put yourself in their shoes, right? There's been thousands of altcoins that are big blocks, so to speak. So that's not what they want, right? They want Bitcoin to have big blocks. So the project has to be called Bitcoin, right? If they had their way, they wouldn't even call it Bitcoin Cash. It would just be called Bitcoin. So Bitcoin Cash is already a compromise for them to have another word added to Bitcoin, right? So if you call it Bcash, I can understand why they would be upset, because then it's no longer Bitcoin. It's silly, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the same thing. It's okay that they want to have this big block coin and whatever they think is the real vision, right? But the problem is the confusion to ordinary users and new users, that they come into the space and they want to buy something. Just the other day, a friend was asking me, like, what coin should he invest in? I said, just for simplicity, I told him, just buy Bitcoin. Everything else is a scam, because I don't want to go into details. But then he's like, okay, fine, I can buy Bitcoin, but now which Bitcoin should I buy? So then I have to, it's not simple, right? Yeah.
He should buy the Bitcoin that's actually called Litecoin.
Yes,
Yes, exactly. Well, someone made a joke.
Isn't
like,
that just a testnet coins?
in a year, if you look at CoinMarketCap, it's just going to be all Bitcoin something. So you'll rename Litecoin to Bitcoin Lite.
There we go. That's the answer right there. Litecoin Cash is the real Litecoin.
Yes.
How about Litecoin Bitcoin?
Maybe.
That almost sounds like Libitcoin, but
Yeah, I mean it's kind of it's been like the naming thing's been pretty funny. Like if you look at Bitcoin, first it was Bitcoin XT, which is like seems like a better version of Bitcoin. Then there's Bitcoin Classic, there's Bitcoin Unlimited, which is supposed to be a better version of Bitcoin, and now there's Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond. Yeah.
You gotta stop shilling for all the fake Bitcoins.
yeah, okay. Let's move on to some real scaling then. So I saw in Riga the presentation of Elizabeth Stark about Lightning, and it's, as far as I understand, it's coming along very well. I think they're going to release a beta on the mainnet soon. But one of the main problems is actually that they lack real developers. They have like 10 developers working on all different implementations now. So what are your guys' thoughts on Lightning?
One confusing thing about Lightning is there's like 6 or 7 different teams working on it, and I think there's multiple competing protocols. I mean, I think a few of those teams decide to kind of work together on the same Lightning protocol. I believe it's the Bolt protocol, but there are a few others that aren't really using the same protocol, which is going to be a bit confusing.
I spoke to Elizabeth Stark about this the other day when I was in San Francisco, and it looks like at the very least LND and Flair are at least trying to work together to make sure that they stick to the protocol. Because, I mean, there's a defined protocol, right? There's documentation, and it's not like your implementation needs to reach consensus. It just needs to meet the protocol. So it's much easier to do than a competing Bitcoin implementation.
Yeah, as far as I understood, there were three teams working together on it. They were building out on GitHub like an entire list of like requirements and to reach consensus, so they will all three be compatible with each other, which is very important, of course. But you also see like on Ethereum, you have like Raiden, and now there was yesterday something else came up, and they're all doing ICOs for their Lightning network. That I don't get. How? Why? Yeah.
Because you need $100 million to build out a Lightning network.
Yeah, you can't possibly do it with like a handful of dedicated developers. I mean, it's just not possible.
Definitely not.
You need your own token. I mean, it's 2017. How can you even run anything without your own token that you pre-mine?
So what kind of time frame you guys think that before it will be people start actually using it on the main chain? Not for like as a test, but like really starting to use it.
Pragmatically speaking, I think we're not going to see actual Lightning usage till 2019. I think there's still going to be a lot of like playing around and figuring out what wallets should look like and all of that over 2018. But I don't know if you guys have played with Zap. Zap is really coming together. I mean, that's impressive for like one developer.
No, I'm actually more optimistic. I think mid 2018 we'll have people actually using it. I mean, whether or not like the large companies like Coinbase and others will actually have support for that is questionable. But I think people will actually start using opening out Lightning channels and sending payments over Lightning.
Okay, so I guess like maybe individuals, but in terms of anyone making retail payments, I'm a little bit disappointed by how slow the BEC32 SegWit adoption has been. Because there's no real excuse. It's not a major technical challenge. I mean, I guess if you sort of hard code everything, it is. But for the most part, it's not that difficult. And the adoption rate for companies and exchanges has been abysmal.
Well, one of the excuses that they use is also that they have to prepare for 2x, that they have to prepare for every Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond fork now, that people are complaining that they don't get their free airdrops, so that they need to spend some engineering efforts in that area. But actually talking about Coinbase, they actually have a full-time Lightning developer now working with with Lightning team. So that's at least that's positive, even though they still didn't implement Segwit yet. But yeah.
So I met him in San Francisco, and basically, I don't know if you guys know this, but I retweeted Brian Armstrong the other day. So they have this full-time engineer, and he can work on whatever he wants. So he's working on Lightning, and they're looking for like 4 to 5 other engineers. So if you're an engineer in San Francisco or anywhere you want to move, and you're willing to move to San Francisco, then you still have to go through their whole like HR process and hiring process. But then you can work on whatever you want. You can work on, I don't know, Monero.
But I think we'll also see Lightning middle of next year, if not sooner. It really depends on if people want to use it. Because if the protocol is defined and we have functional wallets, then there's no reason why people can't actually use it. And a large part of the adoption thing is just priorities. So if Coinbase did prioritize it, then we could see a lot of Lightning transactions happening and a lot of merchant transactions as well. It just takes one that wants to jump on and start pushing it, and then we'll see a wave of adoption.
Maybe a company like Bitco, they were also very fast with Segwit and Bitstamp. The main developers there, they support Core, and for example with Bitstamp, one of the reasons why they implement Segwit so fast was because they actually pay the fees. So they had like a huge incentive to get Segwit out there and implement it, so they could reduce their own spending because they don't charge the users any Bitcoin fees. So another thing I wanted to bring up is I was talking with some people at the conference, HODL and in Riga, and something what people are worried about is that Bitcoin will lose its first place because you have something like Ethereum, which has Consensus as a big marketing team behind it. Dash also has a big marketing team behind it, and then you have Bitcoin, which doesn't have anything. It just has like network effect. So what do you guys think? Is that ever a risk that Bitcoin will lose ground against those more organized, let's say centralized, more organized coins?
I think it doesn't matter. If you're looking at market cap, you're looking at Bitcoin the wrong way, because market cap is such a dumb metric that it's like a holdover from stock markets and whatever, but it doesn't really apply to Bitcoin. You can't just calculate it so simply. You have to take into account market depth, liquidity, and all these other factors.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well is like the user base. So I still do put a lot of value in the number of transactions per second that a network's processing. But I've also realized that speculators are sometimes responsible for a lot of transactions. They're doing things like arbitrage between exchanges and whatever. And you can't really compare speculative transactions per second with like actual usage, and I think that's really where Bitcoin's winning at the moment, and will continue to win, I hope, is in actual usage, and like a lot of these other things are just like, well, we want to invest in ICOs so that we can like increase our Ethereum holdings or whatever.
Yeah, like the Ethereum transactions are really high. It's all because of all the ICOs, people moving ethers around, and it's all speculation in ICOs. I think for like 99% of all these coins, all the transactions are from speculation and people moving coins between exchanges. In terms of actual usage, I mean, Bitcoin is pretty much the only one that has actual real usage, to be fair. And also in the end, like, it doesn't need usage to be valuable. Like, a lot of people are actually just holding Bitcoin as a store of value, and they can use it if they want to, but they don't right now because they're just holding it as store of value, and that gives a coin value without actual usage. So it's really hard to actually determine how valuable a coin is.
I don't know if you know this. Somebody told me yesterday, the day before, that based on current prices, Dash has about $4.5 million a month in budget that they can spend on marketing and whatever the hell they want. That is a lot of money to throw at marketing.
Yeah, it's also taking a lot of money out of the system. Money that should be going towards like miners or whoever that's protecting the coin. It's actually going towards marketing.
Yeah, but I think it's okay. I mean, Bitcoin is really not dependent on marketing. I think Ethereum is very dependent on marketing. I think they have like a team of 30 people doing their marketing. But for Bitcoin, it is a hot topic. So we actually get a lot of press and a lot of coverage. Even if it's bad coverage, it's still getting it into the attention span of the average user, especially with the price going up so high.
So I don't really think that market cap is not important. I think Bitcoin needs to stay the biggest, because otherwise a lot of people will leave for the second biggest, even if a lot of those transactions are pure speculative. It's just a big psychological thing, basically. And that's also why I think market cap is overall a bad indicator. Like for example, with Bitcoin Gold or Bcash or whatever, you immediately have like a huge amount of coins, many of which were lost like ages ago, and still they count as part of the market cap.
Right, so you're saying it is a bad metric then?
It is a bad metric, but no, overall it's a very bad metric. But the psychological, it's important for some people.
Yeah, it's important in certain ways for, I guess, awareness and psychology, but we need to educate people to move beyond that too, because it's a flawed metric, because not all the coins are on equal footing, right? If you look at Ripple, didn't they have to freeze like 25% of their coins to maintain a certain value per coin? It was a lot. And
yeah,
if you look at it, like there's like infinite supply. So market cap, when you compare the two things, you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to, I don't know, garbage.
Yeah, I mean, Ripple created 100 billion coins, something like that. So, and they're releasing it. They can just release them, and sometimes they release them they use it to like pay for or to get an investment, right? Use it as a way to make a deal, and then part of the deal is that the other party can't sell for like 5 years.
So on to the next topic, and I guess something that Ricardo wanted to talk about: hard forks. Why it's good for Monero, and is it bad for Bitcoin? And what's the difference with hard forks for Ethereum?
So I think like something. I mean, for those that don't know, with Monero we hard fork every 6 months. And it's a Flag Day hard fork. There's no miners voting on it. We discuss stuff as a community leading up to it. We hope that the stuff that we're putting in has consent. Well, we have a reasonable idea as developers that there's consensus, and we, obviously we speak to like pool operators and exchanges and whatever. And with Monero, I guess it's reasonably easy, because if we're improving things, if we're improving privacy, if we're improving scalability, then the consensus critical upgrades are obvious. And we sort of have a reasonable amount of runway. We've been pretty bad with that in the past. There's sometimes been times where 3-4 weeks before a hard fork, we finalize the final release, and then we like lambaste ourselves afterwards. And we're like, oh, how can we do something that is so down to the wire? And like I compare that, and I think it's a worthy comparison. I compare that with two things: Bitcoin, which has never had a hard fork, and why is that? And why has Bitcoin never had a hard fork? And secondly, let's compare it with Ethereum, which has hard forks where they release the binaries 2 days before.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah, like, hey guys, please update. We're hard forking in 48 hours.
That's not enough time to even sync their blockchain.
Yeah, you need more than a week for that.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a very interesting and fair point. Well, we all know that the Ethereum hard forks are kind of strange. I was talking to one of the Bitcoin engineers, and he was really not happy with the Ethereum hard forks. Like you said, it was 2 days before, and he couldn't get his nodes synced and everything. So that's not a good approach. So, and why is it then bad for Bitcoin?
Well, it's not really bad for Bitcoin. I think a lot of people are saying, Bitcoin will never fork because devs don't want to. It's not that people don't want to hard fork ever. It's just it has to be done in a safe way, and it's got to be changes that make sense, not just increasing a variable from 1 to 2. That is just a waste of time for everybody.
Yeah, I almost feel like, because I like, this is the other thing, right? With Monero, we know that every 6 months is fine now when we're small. But when you reach the size of Bitcoin, where you have entities like Coinbase taking on 100,000 people in what was it, 100,000 people a day, new accounts?
They claim
that
yes.
yes.
I think it's I don't have reason not to believe them, but I mean when you're that big, when you're taking on as a network, when you're taking on hundreds of thousands of people on a daily or weekly basis, you can't really be going down the road of like, oh, let's just randomly hard fork every 6 months, even if it is planned, even if the network's used to it. It becomes harder and harder because every hard fork change has a ripple effect. You change one thing and then it affects like this piece of code written in PHP and that piece of code written in JavaScript and this like junky wallet for Android, and everyone's got to upgrade. And that's really where Bitcoin stands right now, is a small change, even if it is a change like going from 1 meg to 2 meg blocks, has knock-on effects in the ecosystem. You've got like alternate implementations like BTCD, you've got wallets that have backends like Electrum, you've got a whole bunch of things in the ecosystem that need to be able to compensate and get ready for that fork. And that's a non-trivial exercise.
It's not that hard forks for Bitcoin are bad. I think it's just that Bitcoin is too decentralized. Hard forks require like consensus, and unless there's consensus, it's really hard to pull off a clean hard fork on Bitcoin. For coins like Monero, even Litecoin and Ethereum, it's much easier to pull off a hard fork because there's more centralized like developer group, more centralized community, and it would just happen because even with Ethereum, the Ethereum Classic showed that if there's any contention in the hard fork, the other side would survive, and there's going to be a split. So we saw with Bitcoin, there was kind of a split with Bcash coming out. So because Bitcoin has such a huge user base, so decentralized, it's just really hard to do a hard fork unless you have consensus.
Yeah, I think we're also a bit traumatized from all the fighting too. So people just don't want to do it now because they've realized it's really hard to get consensus, and that there will be factions that will back the smaller coin or whatever and the original chain, and it's just going to be a mess too. So it's a bit of I think there's hesitation now to try to do that.
Yeah, and that's also why I was so excited about SegWit, because SegWit was able to help Bitcoin scale, right, in multiple different ways without doing a hard fork. It can be done with a soft fork. And once SegWit is active, we can do other things like adding Schnorr signatures and Merkle Zatcher syntax trees with soft forks, and stuff like that will help Bitcoin scale more, and all can be done without causing another hard fork debate and like community split. So
I think all the FUD is kind of inevitable. People are so motivated to FUD Bitcoin because it makes their ICO or their coin or whatever better, right? Like that's the whole premise of a lot of the value of these other coins, which is that it's better than Bitcoin in some way. So you can't really deliver on that unless you stomp on Bitcoin and say all these problems and all these false claims, right?
People are still talking about the fact that SegWit miners can come together and deactivate SegWit and steal all the coins in SegWit transactions.
Well, they could also they could also rewrite the blockchain. They could also hard fork it. They could do a lot of things. Like
Increase the 21 million limit.
a lot of people making up the FUD just like they do it kind of in a vacuum. Like, oh, this could happen, but then 100 other things could happen too if you're going down that attack vector. So it's just they're just preying on people that don't know and are new to the space, I think.
The reason why UASF works is because of like user nodes actually dictate consensus. Like miners have to, they can't just hard fork as we see, right? They can't just hard fork and add more coins. They can't hard fork and undo SegWit because there are user nodes that are protecting it. So if they hard fork and undid SegWit, then their chain will not be accepted by the exchanges, the users, and it'll be worth nothing. So yes, you can hard fork. You can do like another split and undo SegWit, kind of like what Bcash did. Kind of do another like Bcash hard fork and undo SegWit, and you can steal all of those SegWit transactions from that fork, but it'll be worth nothing or close to nothing. And no one would care because it's just another altcoin. It's not Bitcoin.
Well, that's why the biggest weapon that these guys have is to say, nodes don't matter, only miners matter and all that stuff. Because in that world, then a lot of their FUD is true. But I don't think any of the users want that world, and no one will accept that world because then we don't need Bitcoin.
Yeah. I think we saw quite strongly with UASF that the users have a voice. And even if I've heard arguments like, oh, UASF was just a bunch of sock puppets on Twitter, whatever. The reality is that I personally know of hundreds of individuals that wanted UASF, including Whale Panda.
So, moving on to altcoins. So, what's going on with Monero?
So, we've been doing some cool stuff. Multisig's pretty close to getting merged, which means that we almost have as much functionality as an altcoin that just clicks clone on Bitcoin anytime in the past 6 years. So that's kind of exciting. And then we've also been doing some marketing stuff. Who knew? We did a crowd fund for like this marketing thing, and we raised $500,000 from the community.
Wasn't there like a $40 million Monero scam coin?
Yes, there is indeed. Electronium. They apparently raised $40 million in an ICO to clone Monero or to fork Monero and change the decimal point because I guess Monero's price is too high. And then, no, this gets way better. They're releasing a mobile app for mining, but it's not actually going to mine on your phone. That would be too easy. It's going to simulate mining. So your phone is just going to get very hot and the battery will run flat, but it's not actually going to mine. It's just simulating mining so you get the experience of mining.
Hey, I'm in. How do I buy it?
If you missed out on the ICO, sorry, bro. You got to buy it on Ether Delta or whatever.
Damn.
They really screwed up with the name. They should have just called it Monero Cash or something. It would been a lot more successful.
Well, you already have Monero Gold, so...
I like Monero Unlimited.
Monero ABC?
So, what I've heard is that you've been infecting a lot of servers with the Monero miners.
Yes, I personally have been infecting servers with the Monero miners. That's been my goal, really, from day one, is just to run botnets.
In the Apple Store?
In the Apple Store, yeah.
Smart.
It's a thing that happens that we have no control over. We obviously don't condone malware. We don't condone botnets. We don't condone bad people doing bad stuff to mine Monero. We especially do not condone people installing Monero malware on Teslas and submarines. That's bad.
I think Teslas are mining Bitcoin.
Not putting any ideas in people's heads, but if it happens, it happens.
Okay, so, and Charlie, you want to say something about Litecoin, or is it's nothing going on there?
Litecoin is the next best thing. It's going to be a huge hit. I'm going to rename it to Bitcoin Litecoin. Or maybe Bitcoin Lite.
I think
haven't decided
Bitcoin
yet.
Lite.
Bitcoin Lite?
It rolls off the tongue. Yeah.
I like your hat.
Thanks. I have a few. I have the full collection.
Yeah, so for Litecoin, what I'm really excited about is now that we have SegWit and Lightning is going to happen, cross-chain atomic swap. You guys seen the first test on Lightning, right? The Lightning cross-chain atomic swap. That's really cool. Yeah, I can't just, it's like the future where Lightning Network is running on all sorts of coins and you can just jump between different chains without any third-party site, right? You just cross-chain swap with any other coin. So if you want to use Ethereum or even Monero, right? If you want more privacy, you can easily swap to Monero and then spend it on the Monero blockchain and then swap back. I think that's going to be really exciting. So can Monero do Lightning?
Yes and no. We're busy. We're in the process. I mean, multi-sig is obviously like the big thing that needs to be done there.
Well, he needs the ICO first before he can.
Of course, yeah. And then we've got to release the token to do Lightning Network because we can't do it without a token.
It's
and we
called
have to do the
Raiden.
token on Ethereum, right? I mean, it makes sense like to do the token on Ethereum.
And you need a very complicated smart contract for your multi-sig wallets.
Oh no, don't worry. We're using Parity multisig. I believe Parity multisig is super safe. I've been told.
Yeah, it's very safe. You keep it. No one can touch your coins. That's like perfect safety.
It's built-in cold storage.
So actually, I was wondering, a serious question. How do you find a person to do a cross-chain swap with without any third-party sites? So how are you gonna find the other person?
So with like Lightning, what happens is the Lightning nodes you kind of broadcast your exchange rate, right? What you're willing to trade, like how many bitcoins for how many Litecoins, and the network, the routing algorithm would find like the cheapest way or the best route that converts your Bitcoin to Litecoin or vice versa.
Okay, so it's basically a sort of like a built-in order book.
Kind of like kind of where each node would, if they support multiple chains, right, they would broadcast their fees. They would broadcast their fees and their exchange rate, and then you will find the best path through it based on that, right? The cheapest and best rate you can get to convert your coins.
So Charlie, do you have any guys working on like a Litecoin version of Zap?
No, we just steal Bitcoin's code.
The truth is revealed.
Well, I mean, we work with them to make sure like Zap supports both Bitcoin and Litecoin, so we just make sure that it works. Right? It's very easy for Bitcoin developers to actually also support Litecoin because we're so similar. As long as they're not Bitcoin maximalists, they're happy to support Litecoin also.
Okay, so any other altcoins you guys are interested in?
I like Bcash.
Bcash. I like Roger, but it's just funny. I don't know. I hope
It's loads of entertainment.
Bitcoin's never boring, right?
Yeah. It's like a reality show.
Just wait till the HBO series comes out.
It's funny the name Bcash like really triggers these people. It's because it really takes away, like it kind of cuts them off at their knees.
It's their product.
Yeah.
No, actually, Roger Ver said that it's his project, so he said it's my project.
To be fair, he was stumbling over words at that point, and he did like correct it at the end of that sort of run on into a project I'm involved in. I mean, like, you know, let's give credit where credit's due. He was under pressure and he was angry, and he did put out the very, very heartfelt apology video. So
I saw like 10 apology videos. They're all like remixed.
Yeah, it's just funny, like ironic to me that you're building a decentralized currency, right? A project for a decentralized currency, and then someone wants to call this a different name, and you're like all upset about it. I mean, it's kind of like if for a decentralized system, if 99% of people want to call it X, then it's X, right? It's not no one gets to dictate what it's called. Like if everybody wants to call Litecoin
Lcoin?
Lcoin, that's who am I to say it's not Lcoin, right? If everyone wants to call it Lcoin.
Lcash.
Well, we all know that Monero is actually Montero, but yeah.
or Romero.
Romero. I like Romero.
But I think they're upset because if you look at it, it's the people that are pushing it, and have invested a lot of money into it that get really upset, like Jihan or whoever. That he's accepting this thing and he's probably holding a ton of it. So if you're calling it something else, that just tanks the value of his asset, right?
It's because he's mined half of all Bitcoin to date, right?
John McAfee said that Jihan mined half of all Bitcoins today. And also, what was the other thing? That the halving happened in 2016.
There's only been one halving in the whole world, and that was it.
Okay, so another hot issue is actually Tether. Any opinions on that?
The thing out there, people are saying that Tether is not really backed by real US dollar. Some people were worried that if all this Tether that's printed, if it's not backed by real US dollar, then it's kind of like fractional reserve, and people are using it to pump up the Bitcoin price. And if when the whole thing comes crashing down, it's gonna kill the market, and people who are left holding Tether will be worth nothing. Right? That's the fear, right? Am I missing anything?
The idea is, or what they're claiming is that it's just being printed out of thin air. And there's of course a close connection between Tether and Bitfinex, but yeah, that's been quite public for a while now. Yeah. But it's also the direction where all this FUD, if you want to call it FUD, is coming from. So the main guy, Bitfinex, is what he's calling himself. He publicly sold all his Bitcoins at around $1,300.
So he's listening to Emin.
Yeah, and Emin retweets everything that he says. That's also already a bad indicator. And I saw that Craig Wright also was talking about it. So if you want to attach yourself to that kind of to those kind of people, yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't make what he's saying not valid. We don't know. Right?
Yeah, exactly. There's no way to audit it, but there's also not like no obvious way that it's like a fraud.
Yeah, there's no evidence. I mean, there's just a lot of conjecture. And if you look at how Bitfinex is being targeted, it's just almost because they've actually put a lot of monkey wrenches in a lot of the plans of a lot of people. And they're definitely high up on that target list.
Sure, I mean, Bitfinex was the one that came up with the name Bcash.
Yeah, exactly. And also the ones who did all like the split tokens, like Bitcoin Unlimited, B2X. So
yeah, they're always first, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're the first to actually do the markets.
I guess like we can't really put ourselves in a position where we sort of say, Bitfinex is definitely solvent or definitely not solvent, because we've seen what happens when people say that a particular exchange is solvent. That's never happened before. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't really have control over what exchanges do, and they got to do what they got to do. I mean, like if an exchange goes down, it shouldn't impact on Bitcoin. It shouldn't impact on any of the currency pairs that they're trading, any more than it impacts on the dollar. I mean, if when Mt. Gox went down, did the US dollar crash?
Yeah, that's a good point.
If an exchange that like has Tether support, it's up to the exchange to make sure that the Tether is backed by real dollar, right? So they should actually do the audit. Which exchanges actually support Tether other than Bitfinex? Is it Kraken?
I think Kraken.
No, yeah, Kraken, Bittrex, Poloniex.
Yeah.
And Kraken is regulated by the US, so they should actually be doing a lot of due diligence to make sure that the Tether that they're supporting is backed by real dollar. Otherwise, if Tether crashes to zero, their customers are going to get real hurt.
Well, actually, it's all three of them are in the US, Poloniex and Bittrex also.
But then I think Bitfinex and Tether or Kraken and these exchanges should actually release like the statements to show that they're release an audit to show that the Tether is backed by real US dollar. Shouldn't be that hard to have an audit for them. I'm not sure why they don't.
They were working on it. I think I saw a tweet passing by, but yeah, that it's taking longer than they expected or something like that.
There was a tweet with like a screenshot of the audit reports, like the first page that confirmed the bank balance.
No, but do you guys think that there's like a real need for like a stable coin, like a Tether or like Euro or?
I think the governments will actually come out with their own fiat crypto coin. So it's a matter of time that they do.
There's definitely a benefit for trading. to have that.
There's clearly a demand, right? Otherwise, Tether wouldn't. Tether would be like one of those dead projects like Paycoin.
Well, there was a $20 bottom, so
Yeah, but there was a floor, a promised
Yeah.
$20 floor.
Unfortunately, that floor is about as valuable as BitConnect's floor.
Bitcoin is actually quite cool. It's like you can earn like stable income, earn
Yeah,
a
you
percentage per
put
day.
$1 in and you make $10 every day. That's incredible. That's awesome.
Well, why aren't we all in, guys? What are we doing wrong with our lives?
Make sure you pull it out before everyone else does, and you'll be fine. I've actually participated in the pirate Ponzi without knowing that it was a Ponzi. Way back when. I don't know if you guys were around back then. That was fun.
Yeah, I also I figured he was doing something with it. So I was like, here's my money, and obviously, you're doing something that's making money, so that makes sense. And I didn't really think it through further than that. I lost a bit of money.
Well, as closing thoughts, I thought it would be fun to do like something like a crypto life kind of thing. So we're all traveling a lot. So how do you deal with all the traveling? Also in regards of like security, do you use burner phones, burner laptops, whatever? Do you take coins with you on a Trezor or what when you're traveling?
I'm fairly, I guess, like out of the four of us, I guess I'm pretty much at risk the most. So when I travel to the US, only when I travel to the US, when the rest of the world this doesn't really impact. When I travel to the US, I go with burner devices. I have an entire separate setup, separate tablet, separate phone, separate laptop, separate accounts for everything, separate email, separate phone number, everything.
Why do you need that?
Because my concern is that I'll get stopped by Customs Border Patrol, CBP, and that they'll want me to unlock my devices. And I don't want to be in a scenario where I refuse to unlock my devices. So I'd rather unlock my devices and give them access to all the burner accounts. Because the only thing that they can do then is read my email and access my second Apple ID. And second Dropbox account.
You're concerned that Monero is a target?
I've had friends in the InfoSec space who've gone over for pretty benign things, B-sides or DEF CON or Black Hat or whatever, and they've been targeted. And I think it's through no fault of CBP. They just sort of, the guy's name comes up on a list or girl's name comes up on a list. And the problem is the reaction. The problem is the person's reaction where they go, I refuse to unlock my laptop. And then CBP almost have this need to then press the issue. And if you continue to refuse, then what are you hiding?
So, thank you for the show and see you next time.
See you guys next time.
Bcash.
Bcash.